In the autumn of 1888, someone was killing women in the East End of London. 5 women, 5 murders. No arrests, no suspect charged, no case ever closed. The killer gave himself a name. He sent letters to the police taunting them. He signed them, Jack the Ripper. For over a century, historians and detectives and amateur sleuths pointed fingers at doctors, barbers, painters, and madmen. The case became an industry: books, films, tours of cobblestone streets. But in 1970, a new theory arrived that made the world stop. What if the killer wasn't a madman from the gutter? What if he wore a crown? The accusation landed on a young British prince, second in line to the throne of the most powerful empire on earth. His name was Albert Victor Christian Edward. His family called him Eddie. The press called him the Duke of Clarence. History has called him Jack the Ripper. There is just one problem. It isn't true. And the real story of who this prince actually was, and how he lived, and who he loved, and how he died, is a story the Ripper legend has buried for more than 100 years. This is that story. Albert Victor was born on the 8th of January, 1864. He was not supposed to be born that day. His mother, Princess Alexandra of Denmark, was not due for 2 more months. She was at a skating party at Frogmore near Windsor when the labor began without warning. There was no doctor present. There was barely enough time to summon one. The baby arrived weighing under 4 pounds. In 1864, a premature birth of that severity was close to a death sentence. The royal family made no public announcement. Plans were quietly put in place for the worst. He was baptized 9 days later in a private ceremony because no one was sure he would live long enough to need a public one. He lived. He held on with the stubbornness of someone who had not been given permission to arrive yet. As Albert Victor grew, it became clear that he was not like his younger brother George. Not as quick, not as sharp, not as ready for the burden of a crown. His tutors reported slow progress. His father, the Prince of Wales, worried. The Queen watched from a distance. What his tutors did not say, what nobody said, because no one yet had the language for it, is that Albert Victor was likely carrying the long shadow of his premature birth. By modern understanding, the neurological and developmental effects of an extremely early delivery can manifest as difficulty with formal learning, slow processing, and inability to sit still and perform on command. He was not slow because he was weak. He was working harder than anyone knew. What nobody measured, because it could not be measured, was the other side of him. The staff at Sandringham, the royal estate where he grew up, were devoted to him. They did not describe a dim prince. They described a warm one, a young man who remembered names, who asked after families, who sat with servants when they were ill the way princes were not supposed to do. His letters were full of genuine feeling. He called his mother darling motherling. He worried about his family when he was away. He missed home with an openness that embarrassed no one except the people who thought it should. At 17, he was sent to sea aboard HMS Bacchante with his brother George. The Navy was the traditional cure for princes who needed hardening. The two brothers sailed together for 3 years, to the West Indies, to South Africa, to Japan, to Australia. Albert Victor wrote home constantly. He was homesick. He was gentle. He was, by every account of those who sailed with him, a kind young man who did not belong on a warship and knew it and went anyway. He came back from the sea no harder than when he left. Cambridge followed. His tutor there, a man named James Stephen, reported that the prince was slow to engage, easily distracted, and showed little aptitude for academic study. What those reports did not mention, what we now know, is that James Stephen himself was later named as one of the Ripper suspects. The man paid to teach the prince was, by some accounts, a man carrying his own dark shadows. History does not always arrange itself neatly. By his mid-20s, Albert Victor had grown into a man the public did not quite know what to do with. He was tall. He had his mother's long neck. He wore high collars to disguise it, which the press mocked without mercy. He dressed carefully, perhaps too carefully for the image the empire required. He showed up at ceremonies. He accepted his titles. But something was always missing, and everyone could feel it, even if no one could name it. What they were missing was the private man. Those who knew Albert Victor closely described someone the press had never found. A man who listened, who remembered small things, who, when he visited the homes of injured soldiers, did not stay the required number of minutes and leave. He stayed. He sat. He asked real questions and waited for real answers. He fell in love 3 times. The first was Princess Alix of Hesse, his cousin and later the Tsarina of Russia, the woman who would eventually be murdered with her children in a basement in Yekaterinburg in 1918. He loved her. She loved another. She turned him down. Albert Victor accepted it. No rage, no scandal. He accepted it with the kind of quiet grace that does not make headlines. because headlines require noise, and Albert Victor did not make noise when he was hurt. The second was Princess Hélène of Orléans, a French Catholic princess. This time, the feeling was reciprocated. She was willing to convert to the Church of England to marry him. Her father refused. The Pope was consulted. Queen Victoria weighed in on political grounds. The match was forbidden. Albert Victor did not create a scene. He did not go to the press. He did not make anyone's life difficult. He accepted it. The third was Lady Sybil St. Clair Erskine. Not a princess, not a suitable match by any official measure. He wrote her long letters. He was, by his own words, deeply attached to her. She did not love him back. Consider what this means. Jack the Ripper was defined by violence against women, by rage so extreme it expressed itself in acts that still disturb criminologists today. The Ripper hated, the Ripper destroyed. And the man accused of being that killer spent the most vital years of his adult life writing love letters, being turned down, accepting it with dignity, and trying again. The math does not work. In 1889, Albert Victor's name did surface in a real scandal, but not the one his later accusers would build their theory on. The Cleveland Street affair. A male brothel in London's West End, patronized, it was alleged, by telegraph boys from the General Post Office and men of rank. Albert Victor's name was attached to the rumors. No direct evidence placed him there. The establishment closed ranks. Several men were prosecuted. He was not. What Cleveland Street actually tells us is that Albert Victor lived a private life in an era that allowed no royals to be private, and that there were people actively looking for reasons to doubt him. It does not tell us he was a murderer. Now, the murders themselves. The Ripper killings occurred in the autumn of 1888. 5 women were killed between August 31st and November 9th of that year. 5 specific nights, 5 specific addresses, all within a few square miles of Whitechapel. On the night of August 31st, when Marianne Nichols was killed, Albert Victor was in Yorkshire. On the night of September 8th, when Annie Chapman was killed, he was in Scotland. The alibi for every single murder was documented, cross-referenced by independent historians, verified against court records and royal household diaries. His whereabouts were never seriously in question among serious researchers. The accusation against him did not come from evidence. It came from a 1970 article by Dr. Thomas Stowell, who suggested, obliquely, without naming his subject directly, that a royal figure had committed the murders and had been quietly committed to a mental institution to prevent national scandal. 2 problems. First, Albert Victor was not committed to any institution. He died at Sandringham, with his family, of influenza, with the people who loved him around him. Second, the theory required believing that the British royal household, the Metropolitan Police, the Home Office, and every person who had ever had access to the prince's schedule managed to maintain a perfect, leak-free conspiracy for 80 years. Governments do not do that. Families do not do that. People talk. Nobody talked, because there was nothing to say. The accusation against Prince Albert Victor was not built on evidence. It was built on a kind of discomfort. The discomfort of an era that could not make sense of a prince who was gentle when the empire needed him to be hard, who was soft-spoken when the empire demanded noise, who loved openly, accepted rejection with dignity, and never became the man everyone expected him to be. And so history invented a darker version of him, a monstrous version. It was easier than admitting the truth. The truth was simpler and sadder and more human. He was a man who did not fit his time. In November 1891, Albert Victor was finally matched with a suitable bride. Her name was Princess Mary of Teck. History remembers her well. She became Queen Mary, wife of King George V, grandmother of Queen Elizabeth II, one of the most formidable figures the British monarchy produced in the 20th century. In 1891, she was 24 years old, intelligent, and, by the evidence of her own letters, somewhat uncertain about the match. Albert Victor was not uncertain. He was, by every account from those around him, genuinely happy, quietly, privately, deeply happy in the way that people are when something has finally gone right after a long run of things going wrong. He was 27 years old. He had already survived more than most people knew: the premature birth, the years of slow learning, the 3 heartbreaks, the Sandringham staff who loved him for the right reasons and the press that dismissed him for the wrong ones. He had, it seems, made peace with himself. His health had not been robust. There had been typhoid the previous year. But in the autumn of 1891, with an engagement ring on Mary's finger and a wedding 6 weeks away, he was happy. He made plans. They discussed where they would live, what kind of household they would keep. The things that ordinary engaged couples discuss in the ordinary way that princes are not supposed to be ordinary. He was 27 years old, engaged to be married, and for the first time in a long time, the future felt like something he could walk toward. On the 14th of January 1892, Albert Victor celebrated his 28th birthday at Sandringham. The celebration was quiet. There was influenza moving through the household. He had been fighting a cough for several days, but he came to dinner. He was present. He was surrounded by his family. 6 weeks later, he was supposed to be married. Within 3 days of his birthday, the cough worsened. Influenza became pneumonia. The royal physicians came and went. Bulletins were issued to the press. The public, which had never quite made up its mind about this prince, found itself paying attention in a way it never quite had before. On the morning of January 14th, some accounts say the early hours of the 13th, Albert Victor died. He was 28 years old. His fiancée was in the room. His mother was in the room. His father was in the room. Queen Victoria was told immediately. She wrote in her diary, "It is a terrible blow to us all, especially to poor Bertie and Alex." He was buried at Windsor. And then something happened that does not appear in the history books about Jack the Ripper. Something that does not appear in the conspiracy theories, or the documentaries, or the Reddit threads, where his name is still to this day attached to murders he did not commit. His mother kept his room. At Sandringham, in the bedroom where Albert Victor had slept as a boy and as a young man, Princess Alexandra gave one instruction to the household staff. Leave it. Leave everything exactly as it is. She laid fresh flowers on his table. She asked that his toilet articles remain arranged exactly as he had arranged them. She maintained it as if he might return. She kept that room for 30 years. Let me say that plainly. A mother kept her son's room ready for 30 years. That is not the behavior of a family in the grip of guilt. That is not how you behave when you have covered up the crimes of a monster. That is not the careful, managed grief of a dynasty protecting its reputation. That is a mother who loved her son and could not let go of the last physical space he had occupied in the world. Albert Victor never became king. He never stood at the altar with Princess Mary. He never had the chance to be whatever he might have become, with all his gentleness and all his struggles and all the things that made him a difficult fit for the role he was born into. What he got was a short life, a body that struggled from its very first breath, 3 loves that did not work out, a false accusation that has outlasted everything he actually was, and a mother who kept fresh flowers on his table for 30 years. Because she knew something the history books forgot. He was not a monster. He was her son. The Jack the Ripper conspiracy gave Prince Albert Victor infamy. He deserved something else entirely. He deserved the truth. He was not the Ripper. He was a man. And that, after more than 100 years, is why history still matters today.